Hello, it's me, Kyle. Welcome to Give Pause Hobby, the channel where I stop to appreciate the things I love to fill my free time with. And speaking of free time, this is the first of a two-part little mini-series about non-strictly game things, or as I call game-adjacent activities that I include in my BG Stats app. I sort of hack the system. I break the intended usage of it. And this time around, we're talking about DBMP. That's design, build, model, paint. And yes, that's a little bit redundant in there, but the acronym is catchy enough that I kept it anyways. So DBMP is exactly what it sounds like. It is kind of physically making, constructing, designing, making more beautiful from painting or modeling or whatever, something that's game related. So that could, the obvious cases are like for Warcry or Kill Team, or more recently Wildlands, where I'm getting, those models to the table and slapping paint on them and as best as, my ability can, and making the game prettier. It can also include things like putting together box control, or designing box control for some games that drastically need it but don't really have it. And that includes decapitating or reducing the size of some of the boxes that are too big for their own good. And then it also has, this is a pretty wide umbrella. It also includes things like when I'm designing my own prototypes, or designing a solo mode to go with a game that already exists. So I'm spending mental horsepower and some amount of free time to put into this effort, and DBMP is how I keep track of that. And then last but not least, it also includes things that are not at all game related but are just sort of there as benchmarks, and we'll get to those at the end. So the reason why this exists at all, why DBMP, if you scroll through my BG Stats app, there's a pretty sizable amount of that activity. Actually, we'll just jump right to the top here. I've been tracking everything we've played in BG Stats since 2018. I found out about the app at the end of, or I'd been seeing it, and then I saw some New Year's this is what I did last year. I was like, where are all these beautifully done charts coming from? And I found the app, and boom, at that point I have been addicted to putting everything in there completely. And so I at a certain point I realized I wasn't hold on, I said I was going to give you the numbers. So since the beginning of 2018, I have had 1,979 hours. Let's just do some quick math here. That is just shy of 82 and a half days worth of activities. And I say activities because, as this video implies, this is broader than strictly playing games. And now I'll cut right to the chase a little bit more. Of those 1,979 hours, 979 of them are actually from DBMP. So that is just randomly comes out that way, but that is a cool 1,000 hours after we take out the DBMP that were games. So it's nearly almost exactly half of the time that I have put into BG Stats. Now, why would I do this? Why would I sully the BG Stats experience from being purely games? And I will admit, when I do those 3x3 things, there's a bunch of times when it's there's no art, it's just a name. It says DBMP WC Red Harvest, which is, DBMP, you know what that stands for. But then I have different tags for Warcry WC or Kill Team KT. So then those categories are by each other alphabetically. So yeah, it definitely clutters the usage of the app. But the reason I started was because at some point, well, hold on, let me figure out what point it was. Goodness gracious, I don't know. That's I can easily tell you when the last play of everything was. But without going into every single one of these light categories, I'm not going to see when the first play was. So suffice to say, I started tracking games in 2018. I think it was somewhere around 2019 that I started tracking these as well. And the reason I did it was because I knew that the whole goal, the thrust of the board game hobby is to play games, to get them to the table, to be competitive, cooperative, whatever you want. But there were some nights that just wasn't in the cards. There were some tracts of free time that I wasn't either wanting to play a game, I wasn't feeling up to it, or there were just some constraints. Maybe we had to be extra quiet because the kids were asleep just over there, and or maybe at the end of the day we're just not up to playing a game, even like a short little one. So oftentimes what would happen is I would just add in something, one of these categories, to watching Netflix as like a companion activity. And I don't think I started tracking right away. I'd been doing that for things because this is, again, a broad category. But I started realizing, like, I'm putting the same part of my brain is getting tickled for me opening up boxes, figuring out how to make a better box organization, or whatever the task may be. I'm accessing the same part of my mind, and I'm getting, like, to a varying degree. Sometimes it's like barely a fraction of the enjoyment of a game. But honestly, given some of the projects and some of them later on, that like more recently, it's almost as enjoyable as actually playing the game itself. There's just so many steps in it, and it's just, again, tapping into the brain in a different way. And I started tracking it, and I said, okay, well, let's put this in there. And at first, I was putting them all down as wins. Like, if you're familiar with BG Stats, you know that if you put something in, if you put in a score, it's going to automatically determine the winner. But if you just put something in, it's going to determine the winner as well. But if you go to the screen where you put in the time, you can manually punch in the time, there is a slider and it says ignore for statistics. And if you do that, then let me just double check that I'm saying that correctly. Yeah, I am. So ignore for statistics is on the same page where you're going to punch in the time. And when you do that, then it won't show up as like a win or loss, because originally I was taking a very kind of freewheeling approach, like, well, I'm winning because I'm doing something fun with my time, and that's a little bit like even too far-fetched for this concept for me. Really, the reality isn't nobody's winning. I'm just doing this thing and it's taking time, but that's it. So I started tracking them, and here we are. Again, it's almost half of the amount of time that I've put into the BG Stats. Now, I kind of explained why I started. Why have I persisted, and why have I kept it up so zealously that I've put in everything? And I originally with BG Stats, I was like doing stopwatch stuff, like, oh, this game was 27 minutes. And now it's mostly just kind of a rough estimate. I always put in a time, but it's just an estimate. And the same thing with the DBMP, but there are some in there that are, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 4 hours, not usually in one go, but, and it's added up over time. And I honestly think that as silly as this probably sounds to lots of people, that this is not only did I recognize this is accessing and exercising like the same part of my dopamine receptors as playing the games, but the fact that I'm putting it into BG Stats it's a, I don't know what you want to call it, a therapeutic. It's has a calming effect for those weeks or months where I really don't get to play that many games. With my schedule and 2 kids at home, my wife and I love to play games at night, but again, lots of times we're not up to it, or we have something else that we want or need to do. And even with solo games, there's just only so many hours in the game, so many hours in the day. And so this is like a a bit of like a, I don't know, reassurance that I'm putting in the time, and it's not that I'm under any contract or obligation to put in a certain amount of hours into BG Stats. There's just, unfortunately, part of my brain that's sort of attached to that like chart on the home page of like, oh, this week is up or this week is down. And it recognizes that, to me, there is more to this hobby than just the games. I think a long time ago, most of us realized there's more to board games than strictly winning. If we were only into board games for winning, then there would be a lot of times when we would be sorely disappointed. And I have kind of come to the same realization that if I was only into the board game hobby to have games on the table, slinging cards, rolling dice, whatever it may be, then I would be sorely disappointed, because there would be time that I would be even just punching games. Certain games, John Company comes to mind, or organizing some major, big, huge box. Like when I first opened up Imperial, the multiple box of Imperial, and my brain just like exploded with excitement, but also like, what? And there's time that you just have to punch in to punch out the tokens, to organize the box. And DBMP has, usually it's something more creative than just like punching a game and putting it into the right baggies. But on a big game like that, or like Snowdonia, when I first got that game and I was organizing all of it, you better believe I put it in as DBMP, because that's time that I could have said, well, I'll do this later. Right now, I want to play a game, or I want to paint a model or whatever. I took my free time, sometimes our free time, my wife and I am organizing something, or I'm doing one of those other activities. So it's a way for me to reclaim that like extra time that usually is seen as like a unfortunate byproduct. Like, unfortunately, if you want to play games, sometimes you got to organize them. And so that's a positive. The fact that I'm recognizing that I am engaging in board games beyond just playing them, that's a positive. And in the long run, because I'm just a stats geek, that's a positive too. Let me go. I went through, I'd already told you the big numbers. So of 1,979 hours, DBMP has been 979, which is crazy that it wound up like that. But anyways, so let's just get the 509 pound gorilla out of the way. 509 of those hours have been Give Pause Hobby, which, by the way, anyone who's interested in a YouTube channel, mine's been going on for about 3.5 years, a little under 3.5. 509, I did the math already. That's 21 days of my life that have been spent recording, editing, posting, all the things. And again, this is time. I think that was really a time when I was like, oh, I should be clocking this, because again, when I started taking, whether it was nap time or quiet time later on when the kids were older, and I was like, all right, I have 45 minutes. What am I going to do with them? Sometimes it's practice trumpet. Sometimes it's do homework or schoolwork. Sometimes it's play a game or mow the lawn. But sometimes it's record something or edit something. So I was like, I got to capture that time. This is my free time. I want credit for it. So 509 hours gone into the channel, which I have enjoyed quite a bit. But that's a pretty hefty chunk of change. So that leaves 470 DBMP hours that are non-Give Pause Hobby. Next biggest thing in the room is 178 hours have been dedicated to Games Workshop related things. So that includes, I lied. That would be 192 hours is spent on Games Workshop related things. So that includes Blitz Bowl, which I forgot originally, Kill Team, and then the vast majority of it, Warcry. I spent 40 hours just on Red Harvest terrain alone. So then that leaves 278 hours that are non-Give Pause Hobby, non-Games Workshop. And just some of the highlights from amongst those, I have 11 hours each for Marvel United. So that's a hodgepodge of making the boxes from Tom Teaches. If you don't, I'll put a link down below. If you don't know about those and you have Marvel United, get some of this organization. There's a few different models that he has, and they're all great. So there's that. There's organizing just the stuff that I have, and then there's painting, which I've done like a little bit of just painting the bases, so it kind of highlights. I'm keeping them all the blue and red color because I feel like if I started painting them, I would need to do all of them, and I wouldn't be as happy with them as I would like. And so I'm just kind of taking the cop out and just doing the base thing. I'm doing like a dark gray, because then it's like, boom, you see what the character is. So anyways, 11 hours there, 11 hours making a labyrinth for my parents, like a marble labyrinth with 4 different strings in the corner. So it's like a co-op experience. 12 hours each for, and both of these, bizarrely enough, are for like kind of spoiler automas, or something to make the 2-player version of the game more viable, or not viable, more dynamic, let's say. And that's for Ahoy and for Wonderland's War. So the dummy smuggler and the groundswell Operation Groundswell, I think that's what I called it. But I haven't worked on those in a while, but I have been hankering to get back to them. So those 12 hours are going to be pushing up soon. 16 hours have been spent on a swing set. So again, the benchmarks that I just throw in there, if I know there's again, it's time that's pulling from my free time. So this isn't just any sort of, I'm not saying like, 5 minutes spent changing a light or whatever, or unclogging a toilet. These are like hefty chunks of time. So when I built the swing set in our backyard, I was like, this is going to take some time, and I diligently was tracking what it spent, and 16 hours. So again, I'm not really going to be adding to that. Maybe if I add the swing set, I would add to it, but I put that in there so I could say like, wow, I have almost spent as much time working on the groundswell operations as I have building a swing set. Speaking of which, I have spent 1 more hour than the swing set working on Food Truck Frenzy, which is my prototype game that has been in the works for 4+ years now. It has only within the last year become about food trucks, and it is feeling better than ever. So more on that in Give Pause Hobby future. I have spent 25 hours working on our paver patio. That was last summer, not this past summer, but the one before that. And again, I knew that was going to be a good amount of time, 1 more hour than a day, turns out. And that was liquidated pretty much all free time I had. So here it is in BG Stats. And the biggest one that, non-Give Pause Hobby, non-GW, was 35 hours spent on Project Jumpstart, which is the Magic the Gathering product. I'm just going to save that for its own video that I already have kind of ideas for, because that could very easily be not a forever like DBMP, but an ongoing one where when I just kind of get the itch, I kind of go back to the well and I work on it a little bit more. And again, I'll tell you all about that in another video. So anyways, at the end of the day, you don't need permission from some random internet guy like myself. Your time, your hobby is yours, and this is how I've been choosing to measure mine. So when I look at my year in review on BG Stats, if I go back to that main page, the insights, and I look at 2022, my top game that I played was 166 hours of Give Pause Hobby, and then 32 hours of Red Harvest Terrain for Warcry. and then 25 hours for paver patios, and then 17 hours for root. So it takes me to the 4th place, and not all years are like that, but ever since Give Pause Hobbies existed, that's always been at the top. But in 2022, it took me to the 4th place where I actually see a game. And to some people, that would be, you know, that would be completely antithetical to what they want BG Stats to be. And to them, I say, absolutely, I see you, I hear you, and go and joy go with you. It's your app, do with it what you will. And honestly, there are times when I wish there was a way I could wipe them away so I could just look at the games, but that's why I have the label right at the front, because then I can at least recognize it for what it is. But for me, it's been hugely beneficial to not get too salty in this hobby, where there are people out there that all the time seem like they have more time than I do to play. But I bet some of those people, they might be looking elsewhere and say they always have more time to play. And it's a way of me, or to help me in, you know, for whatever silly reason, to kind of mollify that urge to just say, I need to be playing. I want to be playing. I always want to be playing, mostly. But this is a way for me to say, you know what? I am engaging in the hobby, just differently. And that kind of wraps back to the name of the channel itself. It's not Give Pause Games, and even the name Give Pause Hobby. The whole idea is that my hobby is anything that gives me pause from my daily life. And I've talked about it before, but usually when it says like something gave him pause, that's not a good thing. It's usually like a realization, like, oh. But I just sort of like flipping the name, that I'm trying to consciously give myself pause from the day-to-day schedule, from the activities that I do at work, and that's what my hobby is. So that's why DBMP is part of it. So again, this is a bit longer of a video than I kind of expected. So if you made it all the way here, tell me, what's the longest project that you did, whether in or outside of games? And no, you can't say, oh, I've been working this job for blah, blah, blah. That's your job. I could say the same thing about being a band director. But, you know, whether it was building a swing set, putting in paver patios, painting up an army for 40K or whatever, what's your estimate for your biggest project and how long it took you? Or if anyone tracks this sort of stuff, whether in BG Stats or somewhere else, let me know. Sound off down below. And like I said earlier, the next video will be the follow-up, which is my other way to kind of get more numbers in BG Stats, which is also not strictly playing games, though this one is a little bit closer. And I'll leave it at that with a cliffhanger. So anyways, thanks for taking a pause with Give Pause. We'll see you next time.